Okay, so as I said, I'm Mr. Rush. I've been here close on 30 years. This is my 29th year. And alongside me is Mr. Hayes, who's come along in the last couple of years. We've now, going from a one-teacher department, I've moved into a two-teacher department. We split the subject pretty much 50-50. We'll explain what I teach and what Mr. Hayes teaches through the slides. Okay, I'd just like to say it's an incredibly popular subject, and we hope that long may that continue, because it's lovely to get different students with different views, and sometimes, you know, excellent debate going on. And we would encourage all your sons. I mean, this year we're at bursting point. We've got just over 20 in each group. We have two groups, so it may be something that you want to consider. Maybe you think, oh, I'd be much happier in a smaller group. So some subjects have less than 10 in the sixth form. But economics certainly is one of the more popular ones. We tend to try and put a limit or a lid on at 20, and we've just crept over that this year. But it's going along well. Okay, so here who we are. This is myself talking, Mr. Rush at the top, microeconomics. I would say, if someone asked me what microeconomics is about, it's if you get the microscope out and really nail down into business and look at firms, which is what we're looking at the up six at the moment, and monopolies, market structures, where markets sometimes go wrong. And it can lead to all sorts of interesting chats. I think about this week even that we discussed maybe that wet wipes are too cheap and that people buy them in this country and unfortunately flush them down the toilet, which causes incredible costs on the water companies, which ultimately the taxpayer can pick up. And so we look at these markets and sometimes try to think about what we could do to correct markets, and that's what we class as market failure. Mr. Hayes, he looks at the big picture, and again, we've just had the chat. For any of us with mortgages, the Bank of England made a decision today to keep interest rates on hold. Now, for some of us on variable rate mortgages or tracker mortgages, that's relevant. And we even try and pass these topics on to your children or the lads who are listening, and very often we'll say, go and ask your parents what type of mortgage, if they're happy to tell you, and you can get a debate going at home. And really that's one of the crux or the better parts of the job here, where we can have discussions, and it can lead to a number of areas. So at the minute, obviously in macroeconomics, we're looking at COP26 this week, where governments are signing up and pledging to do things about the environment. And that's led to interesting discussions whether that will harm or hinder economic growth, which we think countries try to achieve, but maybe there is a downside to economic growth, and maybe the pursuit of economic growth should not be the be-all and end-all. I do sometimes try to put the message across that we've had a great 200 years or more in this country, and other countries are playing catch-up. I sometimes feel they're a bit hard done to if we start putting sanctions on or pledges not to burn fossil fuels, for instance. But that's the big picture: growth, inflation, unemployment, and our balance and payments, as well as other things like inequality. Here it is. That is a definition that you can read, but we can boil that down into one word, to tell the truth, which is scarcity. And even the air that we breathe, we could argue, is a scarce resource that we're not dividing equally or fairly. But scarcity is basically we have unlimited wants, and yet we have scarce resources. So how do we allocate those resources? In many societies like ours, you know, money talks. If you've got the money, you can have the goods. In many cases, but in some, the government will step in and say, okay, well, we think we should allocate education or health or resources that we should not leave to the markets. That still doesn't stop us having private healthcare or private education, but it just means that most of this economy of ours, which we call mixed, but it is a market-led it goes down to the price mechanism. I cannot emphasize enough, and Mr. Hayes has just said on the last talk, to do well in this subject, I think you really do need to embrace what's going on in the world. It will help so much. You do get rewarded in the exam, actually, for application and examples of things that are happening. And I said in the first talk that my heart sank when a low six lad didn't even know what COP26 was, didn't seem to be aware of what had been going on in the last week. So that's slightly sad, but for those who can come in and have opinions, and we absolutely encourage opinions, but be open and able to debate those opinions and listen to other people's opinions, that's what we want. Seeing what the problems are, and I'll come onto a slide shortly about critical thinking, but there are problems in this world, and we try and think of solutions, but then take it on even to the next stage of what is the problem of those solutions. Okay. There are a number of subjects. I mean, I think we could even add English amongst many other things to this, but one of the most common questions we get asked is, well, how close is business studies and economics? And the lads out there, or your sons, might be thinking, oh, can I do both, or should I do both, or are they too close? There is a little overlap, but if you think of Venn diagrams, there's a tiny bit of overlap, but absolutely respected in the separate fields, respected by universities. All universities will take them as separate A-levels. I would say when I boil things down to markets, business boils it down even further, whereas we look at the bigger picture as well in economics. Both are very respected, as I say. Probably economics is slightly more established. I don't think Mr. Gunning would mind me saying that. And we sort of take the higher ground sometimes, but Mr. Gunning is also a fantastic teacher in business studies, and we often compare notes on our students. Politics, again, with Mr. Lindsay, Mr. Wilcock, great subject, good subject to come along into economics and say, well, what about, well, couldn't we do it this way? Geography, again, we talk about trade, we talk about developing countries, inequality is a big topic at the moment, and poverty. Protectionism, we were talking about today, countries that try and put up the blocks on other countries' imports, and maybe why that's so short-sighted. The next one is an interesting one, maths, stats, because that's, I think, of these evenings where we've had the parents in who are happy to put their hands up and say, well, how good does my son have to be at maths? And I really, really would reassure anyone that it's pretty basic what we do in economics. Now, it's not the case, the only proviso of that is not the case if you go on to university. So you'd have to think long and hard at university with economics, to the point that there are some universities that demand maths A-level to study economics. But for us, absolutely not, okay? History, as I say, I mean, you can have modern history, 2007, 2008, even the dot-com boom at 2000, going back to 1929 and Wall Street crash and the depression in the 30s. And, things rear their heads regularly. We can compare and contrast. So that's a very good one. Now, psychology is actually in there. That's a brand new subject this year for our lower six. But actually, it's come along in the last couple of years into economics. We call it behavioural economics. And so I've had to start teaching that. And it is an interesting subject. And it's a case of how do we nudge people to make maybe better decisions. So even the fact of, how you present food at the cafeteria, where you put the fruits and veg as opposed to the sugary, fatty foods. This is all part of nudge there. How do you get people to walk up steps instead of take a lift? How do you get people to pay taxes on time? Rather than heavy fines, can we just guide them or encourage them through messages such as 90% of people pay their taxes on time? So the psychology, whilst it's an A-level at Ambrose, actually is part of economics these days. And so that's a new topic that's come on, as I say, a couple of years ago. Here we go. So jobs, I sometimes wonder, a lot come along lesson one and you say, well, go on, what do you think economics is about? And a lot say money or banking, but actually the subject, and especially if you then take it on at university, can lead to all of these jobs. As I said in the first talk tonight, I've got a past pupil who's in his mid-20s, who's now opting, after doing an economics degree and various other jobs, to go into accountancy. So he's taking his qualifications down at Birmingham at the moment. But he was saying he got in touch and was telling me about the content of the section he's doing at the moment was pure economics, or A-level economics, which he remembered doing whilst he was at St Ambrose. We've got plenty of lads in the past gone into banking and investment. Some made very good money. That's also an attraction of economics, I think, at degree level. That it is one of the highest earners. I think the medics and the economists are right up there, together with some of the engineers. We've got a lad who left a couple of years ago who's actually doing an apprenticeship with the government in economics, which is a nice way of getting a qualification and getting some money whilst he's doing it. So he's not gone to university. He's 19 now, and he's going along fine. And good luck to him. So, you know, whilst most Ambrose boys go on to university, the vast majority do. There are other options as well, but maybe you would go to university and then go into, as we know, several have gone into civil service as well, and everything else included, you know, commercial, industrial, and the public sectors. Here we are, you know, what skills? Well, we'd like to think that you come along with many skills. Well, you definitely will from your GCSE years. Also, you will leave with all of these skills. Again, you know, the critical thinking down at the bottom left there, you know, problems, solving problems. I would take that an extra stage of, well, what is the problem with your solution? We really encourage us to evaluate and maybe think things through and say, well, that could lead to, and well, despite that, couldn't this happen? We like the lads working together at times, and they will do presentations, so they work in teams, and maybe argue one point against another viewpoint. IT is one that's probably left me by at my age, so the lads are usually very, very good at this. The only thing I would say is that they need to be able to look at charts, maybe that's pie charts or just a bar chart, and work out what's going on, okay, because that will certainly be asked in their exams, and they'll see trends and they can see peaks and troughs, and again, you know, it's pretty basic, okay, so all of those, you know, you will solve the problem if we can pick up from it, but the subject certainly lends itself to being able to do those things. We do AQA, by the way. Probably my biggest tip of tonight is maybe you thinking about it and thinking long and hard about your A-level choices, go onto the AQA website. Now, we encourage, I think schools on average pay over £70,000 a year to their exam boards. So for that type of money, you'd hope that there was a lot of guidance, lots of advice. So there are lots of past papers on there. Lots of mark schemes that say students could, you know, have included this, and you might get a feel for the subject. You know, what can we do about inflation or low growth? In my subject, what can we do about people smoking too much, or alcohol, or gambling is the big one at the moment, actually. You know, should an outright ban, or should we ban adverts? And one that we talked about this morning was, should we ban advertising in football on their shirts? But even what could that lead to? You know, would that lead to a flight of our top class players? And we talked about how players used to go to Italy back in the 80s because that's where the money was. Spain followed that. Now it seems England is the place to come if you want to earn lots and lots of money, unless you go to PSG. But, you know, so it gets us going right through. So we can see here that one subject is micro, one at the bottom is macro. The one at the top actually is synoptic, where we use skills from both micro and macro and put them together to come up with what usually you are asked in paper 3, and they're all equally weighted, is you are an economist, here's the problem, what is your advice or what is your guidance? So that's paper 3. Paper 1 is the middle one that we've got, as I say, which is micro, bottom is macro. Results are, and I can honestly say, are always good. Can stand comparison with other departments in the school. That result last year, you might say, well, hang on a minute, what's going on? That's a little bit of an outlier because they were sent to assess grades last year and called tags and teacher assessed grades. And so it was that certainly not a typical year, but the trend has been strong. And as I say, we tend to achieve higher than the school average. Now, obviously, there are some departments, I think of art, a couple of artists tend to get A stars, and further maths, which is a very small group, that get very good results as well. But as I say, economics will compare with any other department favourably, I would say. There's a little video that you could go to, and we'll take any questions now if you want, if you've got any questions. But that link is a bit of an advert for Bristol, but it's actually at the start just saying why it's a good subject, not only at undergraduate level, but even if you just think about it at A level. Can really emphasise again, we're very welcoming. So if any of your year 11s or the lads who are listening want to come along and see one of us, we teach in the same classroom, so we share one classroom, 3108. But if there are any outsiders, please email the school, and just the message from the office will get to us, and we could answer any of your queries. So that's it from me as we hit, yeah. Just about. So if there are any questions, if you want to just hang around for a couple of minutes, we're happy to answer those before we start the next set. Or otherwise, otherwise, it was lovely to see you this evening, and hopefully you enjoy the rest of your night. We've got a question there, Harry. Harry Whittaker.
Yeah, it's Harry's mum. Do you have the exam results from previous years, not just the 2021?
We do have them, but not to hand.
Okay.
Tell you what, let's see if I can find them. We do have them around. Ultimately, they do show quite a nice trend, actually. Moving through, there we go. DSEF.
I think it was 70% a couple of years ago. So the last, just over it tends to be around the 70% mark. I know that. That's A star to B.
Okay.
There you go. So, Bro, A star to B, we've had a bit of a variance, but generally we're around 75–80% in the last few years. A star to C has been 100% fairly consistently.
2019 was a blip year, wasn't it? When there was, there wasn't a teacher for 2 terms. I know that, down to an absence. That's all I was saying. But yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Okay. Right. Thank you.
Thank you for that.
Hi there. So we were just waiting a moment for the last presentation before we start our next one. But I think what we'll do is we'll make a go of it, and we'll finish close to as close to 10 to 8 as we can. Right. Let me just start sharing my screen whilst I'm doing that, it's lovely to meet you all this evening. If you have any questions for us, unfortunately, apparently the chat window isn't working. So if you do have any questions at any point, just if you hold them to the end, that way we can make a go of them after the presentation's over. But if you are able to put them in the chat window, do give it a go, and hopefully it does work whilst we're moving along, so we can try and sort them as we go. Right, well, just to give you a quick taste of who we are and introduce you, I'm Mr. Hayes. So I will be teaching the macro side of the course. We'll talk about the course itself a little bit later. And with me here as part of the double act is Mr. Rush, who will teach the micro side.
Hello.
Mr. Rush has been teaching here for 29 years now.
Yeah.
So he's got a wealth of experience and an incredible part of the fabric of the school, I think is fair to say. Whilst I am quite a bit newer, but equally hope that I can bring quite a bit of enthusiasm and some different styles to the course as well. So, economics and why you should study it. First things first, as we've said, we are Mr. Hayes and this is Mr. Rush with me. Mr. Rush covers the micro topic, so he's looking at more of the in-depth analysis of businesses, of markets, of individual products. He'll be taking the boys through a really detailed part of the course, looking at the different interactions between consumers, the different interactions businesses and consumers, really digging into the fibre of the economy and what makes it tick. In the meantime, I will be doing the macroeconomics with the boys, so I'll be looking at the national economy and the international economy. And I must admit, this is for me the best bit really, because you get to look at government policy. We get to investigate what's going on at the moment and what's happened in the past, and we get to really dig down into whether it's been effective or not. We get to look at the various different things government do, and again, we will talk about current affairs in just a moment. But it's part of the course which is really exciting in that aspect. And possibly the best bit, we get to look at the international economy. So we get to compare the economy of the UK to developing and to other developed economies. We get to look at the trade between the two. We get to look at different trade deals and currency markets that exist to allow us to trade. And it gets particularly in the last part of second year, gets particularly interesting with that. So now that we've identified who we are, we want to have a little bit of a look at what economics actually is. And we do have a definition on the board there for you, but really we can boil it down to one simple word, which is scarcity. The study of economics is looking at the transaction between scarce resources and the people who want it. And we know that in the present economy in the UK, it is an unequal society, and that's something which plays massively into both micro and macro. And we get to look at how the government can fix that, how the government can solve problems of inequality and market failures. And in microeconomics, we get to look at the different ways that the government has done in the past and the new ways that the government is doing now. And crucially, we get to evaluate them as well. We do get to have a good moan about what the government has been up to. So it's a very interesting question, and it does play into the different aspects of both micro and macro. What makes it an important and relevant subject, and this is something that we really do try and ram home with the boys, is that current affairs and the economics is the study of current affairs. Economics is the study of things that are going on around us as we speak, and we try and get them to what's the word? Encourage is the word I'm after. Encourage them so much to go away and have a look at the news and to find out what's happening around them and bring it into our lessons so that we can discuss it, so that we can talk about it, and so that we can apply our economic theory and our economic understanding to what is happening. And I must admit, when I back a good few years ago when I was doing economics A level, that was the best part of it for me, was that as I got to learn more and more about it, the news made more and more sense. And it makes more sense as you look around the world. You can see what's going on in a lot more clearer picture. We do actively encourage, like I say, the boys to go away, find information out, look into things. Particularly popular in economics at the moment is for our boys seems to be investment and investment banking. They seem to have a good few of them have a fascination with it. Well, investment banking or gambling, depending on how you want to look at it. But crucially, and a good few of them have made some pretty horrific losses, but we'll gloss over that. Generally speaking, it's a really good way of getting some information, getting some understanding of the world around you, and actually The banking side of things and the commercial and central banking is something that year 13 for me in macro is focusing on heavily now, looking at the 2009 crash, looking at the credit crunch.com bubble decade beforehand. We get to have a look at the effect that they are still having on the economy today and still having on the global economy. I mean, just in the lesson today, we actually watched a video. We were looking at something that was arguing that the credit crunch caused Brexit, and the credit crunch has had lasting effects after the fact. So it is fascinating, and it is really important that they do have a good understanding of what's going on around them. Lending itself quite well to that is having a look at the different subjects that economics works well with. I mean, my background personally is a politics and history and economics background, so I've done a mix of them through A-level, through degree, and through my teaching career. And I must admit, I've really enjoyed, I still enjoy, being able to teach both history and economics at the moment. And I do think they have a really strong bond. Another obviously subject we have a very strong relationship with is business. We do see ourselves as the senior practice. I think Mr. Gunning in Business Studies would agree with us, hopefully, just in terms of age and length of study for our subject. And there are striking differences between the two. So it's not a question of whether your boys should study one or the other necessarily. We have a huge amount of the lads here who do economics, do business as well, and they find it complements both sides really nicely, and it's not something that we would worry about for university either. Sorry, universities will generally don't have a problem with seeing them as very much separate subjects, so it's nothing you should worry about for higher education either. As I've said, politics plays a big role in economics, and politics often makes more decisions and makes more for us to study than anything else, because it's the actions and the mistakes and the successes of people in the political world that shape the economy around us realistically. And there are very big, very strong ties between the two. Geography again plays a major role when we look at things like geographical and mobility of labour. We look at whether people can move to where the jobs are. We look at trade in between different nations, etc. Maths and statistics is not something you guys need to worry about with your sons, I think, in particular, or the boys who are listening. If you're not particularly happy with maths at the moment, if you're not very strong in maths, it's not a worry for us in economics at the moment. Realistically, we're doing very basic maths. We do encourage the boys to bring a calculator, and we do ask that they bring it to their exams, but that's only for doing quite difficult sums that they couldn't calculate on their own. It's the formulas themselves are very basic, and it is more about remembering the significance of the different terms within them rather than the complexity of the formulas themselves. Again, with terms of history, we look back often at historical examples. We were talking about 2007 and 2000 itself. We've also looked at 1929, the big Wall Street crash. And actually the other day we were talking about income tax, and the first income tax when it was ever introduced in the UK in 1796, way back. When it was a one-time thing designed purely to fund the British government fighting a war, and incredibly unpopular at the time, and something that absolutely vehemently was told we would never have on a regular basis. And again, it's something now which takes monthly from our paychecks. So it's a really interesting blend between the two. And psychology, again, particularly for Mr. Rush in micro, is something which has become much more important over the last few years, and is really we're quite happy to be able to offer it at Ambrose as an A-level all on its own as well. So we've had a look at the different subjects it can work itself well to, and now for really the big question is, what jobs can we lead your boys into? Majorly, of course, people think when they think economics, they think accountancy and they think banking and investment. And for me, further back down the career ladder, I was looking at accountancy quite strongly, and a lot of people I came through university with did the same thing. And it is a very strong A-level and a very strong degree to take into the accountancy, into the field of accountancy. Banking and investment, often the more glamorous of the options, and again, particularly in media, things like Wolf of Wall Street and The Big Short have made it quite a popular thing in recent history. But again, we do talk about it a lot in economics. We talk about it a lot in micro, and it is something that a lot of the boys see themselves going into, particularly from the glamour side of things, I think. The government and civil service is a really strong option too. Lots of people do go into economics at A-level and at degree level, and the government and civil service is a really good place for you to use those skills, particularly to make use of them. Again, I know a good few people who've taken their economics degrees and a good few former students who've taken their economics degrees into the civil service. They're now working in ministries for various secretaries of state. And one even actually who, a good few years ago now, did end up as Secretary of State for Education. I think Damien Hines came from here with an economics A-level, I believe, a little bit before my time though. And again, there's many more commercial, industrial, public sector jobs, and lots of opportunity for the boys to take their economics into higher education and even further. In terms of the skills that we give the boys and that they will gain whilst they're here, and that hopefully actually they come with themselves, is a lot of critical thinking, a lot of problem solving. We get the boys, the crucial skill in first year of economics is to get the boys to think analytically, to think about the world around them, to think about the economic theory we're placing in front of them, to explain to us how it works. And in the second year, we then get them to completely take that apart again. We get them to evaluate it and tell me actually why it wouldn't work and why an alternative option would work better. We love to get them to think critically about problem solving and to find solutions to issues, and equally then again to get them to think about the issues their solutions may have, because it is incredibly reflective and it's brilliant in that aspect. Teamwork again is really important, something we get them doing as often as I can, in particular with things like the banking industry. We had them form their own little investment banks a couple of weeks ago, and they were handling in vast sums of money, and particularly in year 13 with a terrifying casualness, and trying to see if they could turn that into even more money on the stock market, on a pretend stock market. We love to get the boys to work in teams to create projects and presentations for us. Again, from my end, we had them doing a particular favourite seems to be getting them to look into different economies around the world and trying to solve the problems within those economies as a group, and then forming those solutions into a presentation and explaining it to the rest of the class. IT and statistical analysis are two things which we do encourage the boys to already have some skills within. You don't have to have an IT GCSE, but it is a good start. And again, the maths does help with statistics, the idea that they can look into data analysis, they can look at pie charts and bar diagrams and bar charts, and see what they effectively identify what they're showing them, is quite an important skill to have. Our specification is just up on the board there for you. So we are an AQA subject, which means our exam board is AQA. We pay them an awful lot of money to provide us with the exams, with materials, with support, with supporting resources as well. And we do actively encourage the boys to go away, log into the AQA website at home and have a bash and see what they can find on there, from resources, from mark schemes to past papers. It's absolutely crucial as part of their revision, which we do suggest they start from bang on the start of year 12. That they get on there and they have a look at what they will actually be handling, in the end of 2 years' time. We are a linear course, which means we have no modular exams, and we have no coursework. We have 3 exams at the end of the second year, and that's it. Our first exam is a synoptic exam, so economic principles and issues is a combination of both micro and macro. It's lovely in the sense of actually we tell the boys to go away and apply their understanding of both micro and macro to questions and to problems that are posed to them in that exam. And the other sigh of relief that is often breathed by the boys is when they're told that half of that exam is multiple choice as well. Markets and market failure is the second exam. That's number 2, and that's micro. So that's Mr. Rush's exam. Looking more at markets specifically, getting into quite a lot of detail with them. And then the third is the national international economics. So we're looking at the combination of both our economy and other economies, and the different things that can affect them, the different ways they can interact. It is worth talking about results, and we did have a question before about the longevity of our results. We'll talk about that a little bit. Last year we had a fantastic set of results. I mean, obviously they are slightly outlying since they were centre assessed, they were centre generated grades. However, that does fit our general trend. We have normally 100% A star to C grades, and we roughly have 80% to, in this case, 86% last year of A star to B. In fact, we were phenomenally pleased because we had 64% A star to A grades last year, which was a fantastic achievement. On a normal year, though, we do hold our own within the department. We are absolutely comparable in terms of results to other departments across the school. We have a very, very, very strong department. We have very strong results and a history of very strong results, which we are enormously proud of. It is worth pointing out that as class sizes are getting bigger and we are becoming more popular of a department, which we are absolutely thrilled about, we will see the distribution change, I imagine, in grades slightly, as is to be expected when class sizes are doubling. This year we have actually had the point where we literally have had standing room only in several lessons at the start of the year, with more boys transferring in than we expected. And we do normally cap our lessons at 20, our classes at 20 each, so which means we have around 40 spaces for economics every year. And we are, like I say, we're thrilled to see that they are getting filled, absolutely. Right, the last thing on that screen there is a video which we won't play for you this evening, but it is a fantastic video. The first few minutes of it is brilliant because it is from Bristol University, and it is very much an advertisement, a pitch for their economics degree. But the first few minutes really explain to you why economics is such a valuable subject to study, not just at A level, but also why it's so popular at degree level as well, and why it's so important. Right, I think that brings us to the end of our presentation. We have a good few minutes left, so if there are any questions, please feel free to pop them in the chat, or you can unmute yourselves now and we'll do our best to answer them. Alternatively, if you aren't able to get hold of us tonight, or if there are some questions that pop up in the next few days or at any point, please feel free absolutely to send the boys up to us in lesson, not in lesson, sorry, but in school. We're really happy to talk to them about it and to discuss it further with them as an option. And any questions you may have, we can sort out as well. Equally, if you'd like to converse with us personally, we have a staff email address which will be available at the office if you want to email them, or if you're coming from another school and you want to email the office, they will give you our contact details, and we are more than happy to have a talk with you about this as an option for your son next year.